Here with afterwards about Indian cinema and Distant Thunder is the director of the film, Satyajit Rai, and film critic for the Los Angeles Times, Kevin Thomas.
We are very lucky that we have with us Satyajit Rai, who directed A Distant Thunder. How did you happen to select this particular period of time?
Well, this particular family happened during the war, during the Second World War, when I was an advertising man in Calcutta. I read the story around 1950 or so. It's written by the same author who wrote the two novels on which the trilogy was based, Opera trilogy was based. He's a great writer. He's one of my favorite writers, and I had read the book then, and I had memories of this particular famine, although I was living in the city. I was not a village boy. I met Satyajit, who had been Oppo in the third part of the trilogy.
Yes, I remember.
And I also found a village where the film could be made, and I just made it. It was something which I've been wanting to do for a long time, 20 years, as I've just told you.
In the film, the point is that this village is so remote that the villagers really don't quite understand that the war is going on and who are the adversaries. And I know that when I first saw the film and was writing about it, that it was afterwards that I found out to what extent that the famine was man-made.
No, that's true. It's known as the man-made famine because there was a good harvest that year, and there was no drought, which the things that normally would cause a famine. It just so happened that the Indian troops were fighting for the British, and the food, the rice, was being diverted to the troops. The actual reason was never found out by these poor, remote villages. You know, they just began to wonder what was happening. And one of the points that the story makes, that the author makes, is that nature remained beautiful and bountiful, whereas all these poor people were dying for lack of food. And this is one of the reasons why I decided to make the film in color, although I have been attacked for prettifying the famine. But I believed that it was important to make this point, which is made in the original novel, that all these, this suffering took place in surroundings of great physical beauty.
For me, what sums up the film is that recurring image of the butterflies in the mud.
One day when we were not working, the weather had probably turned bad, we just saw, they were right near where we were sitting and sort of waiting for the sun to come out, that this was happening. There's some marvelous dance of butterflies. So we shot it, and I later used it in the film as a kind of a recurring symbol of nature's indifference to human suffering. And they were dancing while the people were dying.
I think that the film recalled to me several others of your films, and it's dealing with the status of women, and a certain changing view. I think that's one of the really most eloquent aspects of the film is that by the end, the husband has had a new awareness of his wife.
Yes, and both the husband and the wife had shed all their, you know, they were Brahmins. They were the only Brahmins in the village, which meant that they had certain privileges over the other villages. But by the end of the film, there was this famine had caused a leveling down.
Yes.
As you see, this has taken place, and they were more aware, they were more deeply involved in the surroundings, and they realized that in circumstances like these, privileges don't exist anymore, and they're belonging to a higher caste than the other people meant nothing, which is to show that they were all one.
Of course. How long did it take to make the film?
Well, we had to plan it because we needed sequences in cloudy days, in the rainy season. So we started to shoot the film during the monsoon, which is June to September in India, or at least in Bengal, where the film was made. And then we also wanted the harvest, so that's October, November. So we carried on for a little longer. There was a period when there was no shooting done, but I was cutting the film at that point. So roughly, I would say about a 5-month period, starting around July, ending in November, December, and 45, 50 days of shooting spread over this period. Mm-hmm. We had to go back to the village, which had changed by then, you know. During the rain, it's all slush and mud, and then at the time after the rains in autumn, or fall as you call it here, it's the paddies are out and they begin to ripen towards winter. So you had this various sort of, well, let's say color schemes in the film. And also, it had to be authentic in terms of the actual time when the famine took place. This was the time when it took place.
One of the most striking images is at the very beginning. When you see this idyllic setting of the women bathing, when you first see that, you have no idea of what century you're in until the planes come over.
Right.
Head.
The villages haven't changed very much over the years. I mean, that image of women bathing in the river or the pond, as the case may be, and later on sort of coming back from the river to their houses carrying those brass pitchers filled with water, that could have happened 1,000 years ago. You find references in literature. You can see that these images in paintings of that period. So that, juxtaposed with the planes flying overhead, sort of brings you sharply back to the present, you see.
One had the feeling, though, that their lives were rather forever changed by the
Oh, yes, certainly. As I say, at the end of the film, I make an actual statement. There's a legend which says that 25, 30, 40 million people died. But I thought it would be impossible to suggest this vast scope, and I preferred to sort of confine myself to this small group of people in a single village, but suggesting at the same time that this, with the last image in the film, where this family comes, this old man, his wife, and 5 or 6 children come to take shelter in this couple's house. And the image sort of expands to show maybe 500 people walking towards the camera. And then they actually eventually ended up in the cities. They all came to Calcutta to beg for food. They were reduced to begging.
Here is a film that has to do with famine, and yet is a very beautiful film that is accessible and will affect you without, being so grueling that it's impossible to watch. I think that was that it's extraordinary that we can see something that we can identify with.
Yes.
Instead of, if you just say baldly that all this picture is about famine, who wants to see that? It's
yeah, but it's not just people dying or people suffering. There are all sorts of other things in the film. Even in the early part, I would say there are amusing touches, because this character of this man, this Brahmin who sets himself up as a teacher, as a priest, and everything. Yes, a very pompous sort of amusing character. And that's the whole point. You see, there are amusing things happening in the early part of the film, but later, when the famine comes, and really when the realization grows that this is, we're going to have to face a very disturbing sort of future, then things begin to change, and then, of course, I end the film with the first death from famine, from lack of food, and with the realization of the people that people can die of hunger even when there has been a good harvest. So that is the point where I end the film. I don't let it go beyond that and show thousands of people die.
Yes.
And that was the whole point. I wanted to make the point.
Yes, I think it's so important that it be accessible so that we can see this by implication.
After all, there are very all sorts of basic emotions involved in the process, you know, love and hate and tenderness and pathos and laughter, humor. All that is there.
Is it really true that this film only cost about $100,000 to make?
Yes.
I just think that is incredible. Why?
Well, others have cost even less. This cost more because we were using color, you know.
Do you prefer color? Or do you prefer
Well,
black
there's
and white?
no question of preference at this point because we cannot use black and white anymore because of very poor quality of stock that we get. An East German stock which is not satisfactory at all. So we now have to think in terms of color, and as long as we can get Eastern color, we can keep on using color. But when we are deprived of that, I don't know what I'm going to do.
American audiences know Indian films almost entirely through yours, but actually they're really quite atypical. The typical Indian film goes on for hours and hours and is pure escapist entertainment with bizarre, almost musical interludes interspersed with heavy action sequences. However, there is a new Indian cinema developing, is there not?
Yes, there is over the last 4 or 5 years. Young directors, not so much in Bengal where I work. There hasn't been very much happening by way of new work, interesting, promising work. But certainly a great deal is happening in the south of India, which comprises Madras, Kerala, and some of these other states. Young directors are being encouraged by the government with loans and grants to make films, serious low-budget films on offbeat, serious social themes. And so we have 3 or 4 directors emerging in this particular region, and also in Bombay we have 1 or 2 directors who are working, again, not within the commercial setup, but independently, sometimes with government help, sometimes with independent production resources, making very interesting, very promising films on serious themes and serious stories, low-budget films, as against, you know, we make about 600 films a year,
yes,
feature films a year.
It's about the largest industry in the world.
I should think it is the largest industry in the world. And out of which, let us say, about 90% are, as you described earlier, they stick to a certain formula of song, dance, action, romance, make-believe situations, etc. But we do have a certain resurgence, which is definitely in evidence at the moment.
It's hard for you independent filmmakers, innovators, to reach large audiences, is it not?
Yes, but they keep their budget low. They, you know, they are aware of the fact that there isn't a very large audience for them. I have never been aware of a very large audience in India. So, you know, it's they work in a very sort of disciplined fashion, with not with stars, not with big stars, but young people, possibly coming out of the Film Institute. There we have a government film school near Bombay in Pune. And they work with these young people with small crews, and that's how they do it. And some of them have been successful. Some of them have even been sent to festivals abroad. And I'm sure you here will...
Oh, yes, we've received several, like Ankur, The Seedling.
Right.
Are they shown through film clubs or in commercial theaters?
No, we don't have art theaters. They are shown eventually by film clubs, also will show them, but they open commercially. Maybe not in the biggest theaters, but in the smaller theaters in the major cities. And there is definitely, it has been proved that there is an audience for them.
Oh, that's encouraging.
Which encouraged me to make The Chess Players in Hindi, in a language which is not my own. I believe there is an audience for an offbeat Hindi film.
You're now completing another of your children's films.
Yes, I'm in the middle of shooting a children's film. I do them from time to time. I've done 2 already, and this is the 3rd one that I'm doing. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.